Hi, Bill. Welcome to Funnel Vision Podcast. Excited to have you on the show today. And I know the topic that we're going to be talking about is something that comes up so often with, with my clients, I'm sure your clients, which is, taking that sales leader and promoting them into sales manager. So excited to have you on and kind of chatting through this topic and the pros and cons and all the rest.
Glad to be here.
Perfect. So let's talk about to start, like, what are the qualities that, make someone a superstar salesperson, like independence, competitiveness, individual drive, and how do they, or do those qualities also translate into the skills needed to manage and develop a team?
Yep. So I call those people rainmakers, and rainmakers in my mind they have a different skill set than the typical sales manager, and typically they're very good at what they do selling, but that's a completely different skill set than being a sales manager. Let me kind of explain. So rainmakers typically succeed through personal relationships, their sales expertise, their individual work ethic, but they really struggle in transferring those skills and capabilities to other team members. They also frequently struggle with administrative responsibilities and organizational alignment between, being independent. They're not used to having all these administrative responsibilities. They're used to focusing on revenue generating activities. And they also typically neglect some of the essential management functions like performance reviews, team meetings, organizational initiatives, because again, they're used to individual selling activities. So typically a rainmaker is not a good sales manager. That doesn't mean they're not a good salesperson. They're just not a good sales manager.
Yeah, it's interesting because in sales is one of the unique professions where the person, somebody that's in sales can also be extremely successful in their career without necessarily moving up the ladder to a management position, right? Like when you're a hunter, a true rainmaker, like you said, like you're great at this because you have all those skills, and more often than not, like you're saying, like those skills don't necessarily translate into being a great sales manager. And a lot of times, not only don't they not translate, but when you're a rainmaker, that's what you love to do. Like it takes all that passion that you have for sales, and it may take that person out of what they're best at and what they really love to do in the first place.
Yeah. And the problem is when you take them out of what they're really good at, a lot of times all the time you're removing your top performer from the daily sales activity. And that could be a hit to your sales of 20%, could be up to 70%, depending on how much selling they do and how much performance they do. And so the company automatically is going to take that big hit, 20 to 70%. And the bad part is that the rainmaker moves into the sales manager role. Typically, he's not going to do good at the sales manager role. So you still have the problem that you haven't solved, which is you need a good sales manager. You've taken the top performer out. You haven't solved the sales manager problem. So now you've got two problems. And then the third problem is the rainmaker, as he does this job, he starts to realize, you know what? I'm not really good at this job. And I've been really good at the job that I've been doing for how many years. So then they get frustrated, they get demotivated. And a lot of times they'll leave the organization because they don't like the new role that they have. So really, you think you're solving a problem. You're actually creating one, two, or maybe even three different problems when doing that. So
Yeah, that's great information. And you said, and kind of that led into like the next question I was going to ask as well, is like, what risks does the company take when they, take their top revenue generator out of the field and move them into the management? And like you said, it's actually more that it's more than just having that person do, create less revenue for the company if they were the number one, rainmaker. But I didn't really even think about that. Like moving into, a new, into that new role, they may not be happy or fulfilled in that role. They may not be great. They may not have gotten the skills that they needed to coach the team. So you might lose team performance, individual performance, and if that person may, not be happy in their role and decide they're going to look for a new position, or try to leave the company. So there's so many challenges to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I'll be honest with you. I get it. A lot of CEOs, when I talk to them, they say, hey, listen, I have this problem though. I've got this guy that's been with me for 20 years. He's really good at selling and, he's a long-time successful salesperson. I think he's getting bored. He's looking for new challenges. I need to give him a higher title. I need to move him into something, and it seems like the natural position is to move him into, the sales manager role. And I always caution, don't do that. Find some other thing that can use his skill set, which is individual performance, but don't try and get him to manage a team, because they're not good at that. They're not good at coaching. They're good at closing. They're not good at coaching. So that's always the challenge for a business.
Why do you think so many rainmakers struggle with that? Like from shifting to like, I'll just close it myself to, helping others to coach, coaching others and helping the others perform.
Well, I mean, rainmakers, they're individual performers. They're not, it's not bad. They're not team players, but they're not team players because they've just figured out a system themselves. If you sit down with a rainmaker and you say, explain to me what you do, put it in a process. They go, I don't know. I just do it. And it's like, okay, so how are you going to teach someone by saying, I don't know, I just do it? That doesn't work. As a sales manager, you have to have processes, and you have to have, technique, and you have to have, a standardized methodology, and you have to have talent development capabilities and all those types of things. And if you don't have a standardized methodology and process, you can't teach people. And rainmakers, that's not the way their brain works. Their brain works like an individual performer. And so it's not going to work for them to try and teach other people. It's not that they don't want to. It's they don't know how. They're not teachers. They're doers. They're performers,
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting thinking of that, because it's like if you have oftentimes when you want to move your, rainmaker up into a sales manager position, it's because you want them to teach the rest of the team, like, go create more of you, right? Like go take your drive and then go get the team to do exactly what you're doing. But those people in the way that they typically are, just kind of by nature, is like you said, they don't necessarily are not good at the process, at the structure, at the, creating that, process procedure. It almost comes like naturally to them. They have that, it's skills that, different, people skills, relationship skills. And there's some of it that can be taught, but it's also, like you said, it's so much of it is in their head. They just become naturally good at it. And they're not always naturals at, creating that process and structure. And I think the intention of the company when they promote that person into a sales leadership position is exactly that, to pull out the process, the structure, and make the rest of the team just like you. And right. That's probably, definitely going to backfire, really.
And the problem is they don't have a process. They have it's just, it's not even in their head. There's not a process. It's just, they do it based on innate nature, right? And so what they do when they become a sales manager is they don't try and teach people process. They get frustrated. They hoard the relationship, and what they'll do to the team members is they'll say, just get out of my way. I'll do it, you know? And so then they just start doing everything for everybody else. And then they start to take over all the other relationships. And so then the team members are sitting there going, I don't know what to do. You know, he's doing it now, you know? And so you take 5 team members and you move all their accounts into one person, and then he's doing 5 times as much, but he's not really teaching anybody anything because he has no process, you know? And again, it's not that he's a bad person. He's a doer. He's a performer. He's got to get things done. And when people get in his way, he just, you know, bulldozes them and goes and does it his way, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, for sure. And then how about how even that situation affects the morale of the entire team? Like, you know, if the sales leader is just going to jump in and do instead of, you know, coaching and leading, but also now we've got a team that they're leading, and that this person was, you know, previously a peer. Now their peers are reporting to them as the sales leader and was once competing with them, but now they're kind of leading as a team. It creates all different types of dynamics that could, you know, cause some issues.
yeah, and originally, like in the beginning, the team members go, okay, they think the same way as the owner of the company or the president of the company. They think, hey, this guy's really good at selling. They're all excited. He's going to take over the sales manager role, and he's going to teach us how he does it. Quickly, they find out that's not how it's going to work because he doesn't know how to do that. And, you know, as a sales manager, you need to do strategic planning. You need to do resource allocation. You need to do, you know, market segmentation analysis. You need to do performance reviews and territory assignments and, you know, optimization and all those kind of things. He's not going to do that. He's going to try and figure out how to sell as much as he can. And now he's going to kind of take over their accounts. And so they quickly learn, it's not going as well as we thought. And so then they start to think the same way the owner thinks. Wait a second, this is not really going as well as I thought it would go. I thought he was going to be a great sales manager. He's not. He's just taking over all the accounts. So then the sales team gets frustrated. So then you start to lose salespeople as well. So now you're multiplying the problem even more. So now you've got a sales manager that's taken out of the day-to-day selling. You've got a sales team that's dissatisfied. You've got the owner that says, you know, I don't really have a sales manager that's teaching these guys anything. You've got the sales manager, who is the former Rainmaker, who's frustrated because no one's following his lead. And so the whole organization now has got 4 problems. So it just gets worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, yeah. And if that person isn't, you know, if you do move a person to sales manager position and they're not succeeding or they're not doing what you want, it's really hard to go backwards then, right? It almost seems like like they're being demoted back into a sales position, which is another just interesting dynamic, really specific to sales, which is your top Rainmaker can be earning more and have more earning potential than even your sales manager. I've got situations where the top salesperson is earning more than than the president of the company sometimes, you know, because they are the Rainmaker. So it's like an interesting dynamic where, like, if you had to, you know, take that person and take them out of the sales manager seat, it almost feels like a demotion, but they could still be in a position where now they're able to make more money because that's their sweet spot and that's where they try to be. So it's a lot of very unique circumstances that have to be, you know, obviously communication is key, where they have to be handled so delicately to make sure that you're, you know, preserving that culture and everything.
Yeah, what I typically tell my clients when they're thinking about doing this is I give them all the reasons why they shouldn't do it. And then they'll say, okay, but I still have this problem. I still have a successful salesperson who's a rainmaker, who's becoming bored. He's seeking new challenges. He's looking for a different title. He's being adequately compensated. He's not really concerned with the compensation, but he's looking for something different. And he's been a long-term performer. He's loyal to the company. I'm concerned if I don't give him a new role, he's going to leave the company. And the only role that I have is sales manager. And my answer is, here's an idea. Why don't you make him director of strategic accounts or vice president of strategic development? Because those roles, he can use the skill set that he has and has a different title and has a different challenge. Now, the challenge is you're going to take your most important accounts and give them to him. That's great, because those are the most important accounts, and you know that he's a closer. And now he's got a new challenge. His challenge is take those strategic accounts and build them up by 20% or build them up by 30%. He doesn't have to have anyone reporting to him, but ask him to put together a business plan on how to grow those strategic accounts and what's he going to do. And that usually will satisfy it, because it's a different title. It's an advanced title. It's a new challenge, but it uses the skill set that he already has. And then it takes away from, you can then hire a sales manager who actually has sales management skills, and you move him away from that sales manager, because the sales manager, so he's not really competing with the sales manager. He's a partner to the sales manager. My experience is that works every time, or at least 90% of the time.
Yeah, I actually love that idea. Like that's brilliant, really. And it's something that actually I'm going to be incorporating into my conversations with my clients too, because this conversation comes up often. But I love that, taking that and putting it into, a higher title, strategic, so it solves that, kind of fills that, pain point of, here's a promotion, here's, a way to grow, and it really still uses that person's skill set. Yeah, I absolutely love that. So what qualities should companies look for when hiring a sales manager? And if they're not going to take that sales leader, their rainmaker, what should they look for a sales manager?
Sales manager, in my mind, is someone that's very process driven. Someone, I almost think of them like an engineering mentality. So a lean process mentality person, because in my mind, sales is nothing more than an engineered process. You got to have stage gates that you go through in a process. If you don't have a good sales process and a good methodology, you can't have a solid pipeline management system. And if you don't have a solid pipeline management system, then you can't manage your forecast. And if you can't manage your forecast, then you can't manage your revenue, and you can't, provide a good forecast to your board of directors. And what your board of directors, what they want to know, how much revenue is coming in, and you need to know how much revenue based on how much bookings, and it all, the bookings comes from the pipeline, and the pipeline comes from the process. So it all flows back from that. So, obviously there's other things but if you've got a good solid sales process, then you can start to teach people, in this stage gate, you need to know how to do this. In this stage gate, you need to know how to do this. In this stage gate, you know how to do this. And you start to figure out in which parts of the sales process they need training. So you can actually start to build salespeople and train them based on the areas that they need help in. So it's almost like lean process management for sales, is my thought.
Yeah, that's great advice. And you're absolutely right. That person that's going to lead and manage a team has got to be process driven. They've got to be, it's like the cliche, but they've got to be the ones like making sure that the team is entering their information into the CRM and getting all the kind of the details, because it's got to be, you've got nothing if you don't have that process, and then your numbers and your data and, kind of all of that. So yeah, that makes total sense. So great. So, Bill, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, what you do and where people can find you.
So, I've been in commercial experience now for about 40 years. Hate to admit that shows how old I am. I've been in industrial B2B markets domestically and internationally for 40 years, extensive experience in growth strategies, go-to-market planning, sales methodologies, sales enablement systems, and M&A diligence. 20 years experience as a CEO of several North American and multinational entities, ranging anywhere from 60 million to 500 million in annual revenue. I ran the majority of my career, I ran a $500 million multinational industrial automation company out of Germany. Currently, I'm a partner and fractional chief revenue officer for Chief Outsiders, which is the nation's leading executive as a service firm. And I'm also a senior advisor for a private equity middle market firm called Dunes Point Capital. We've invested about $5 billion in companies since 2001 and have about $1.6 billion in assets under management currently. So that's what I do.
Well, and that's highly impressive. I love that. And where can people find you?
You can find me on my website, or on my email, which is wbell@chiefoutsiders.com, or go to the Chief Outsiders website, which is chiefoutsiders.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on Funnel Vision today. Appreciate it. I think this was a great conversation and so relevant to so many companies that are in this position. We have these conversations every day. So appreciate it. And thanks for coming on.
All right. Great talking to you.